It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. This episode, I sit down with comic book writer and artist Ray Anthony Height as we talk about his career in the comic book industry and his current Kickstarter campaign that's going on right now, and that is Midnight Tiger. It's currently going on. It's about halfway through its campaign period. It's about 15 days left as of this recording, and it's a comic book story about a hero, which is what he's been doing most of his career. He actually created a Midnight Tiger a while ago, and back in, I want to say 2012, and it stopped for a while, and now he's devoting himself back to bringing the character to the pages of comics, and he's doing so by bringing it to Kickstarter. I am a backer of it, full disclosure, but again, I had a good conversation with him. I hope you all enjoy it, and once we're done, I hope you go on out to Kickstarter and give your support to this campaign as well. It's a dream project of his. He started his own company to do projects such as this. So here is my interview with comic book creator Ray Anthony Height, talking again about his career in the comic book industry, as well as his Kickstarter campaign for Midnight Tiger Evo. I'll see you all on the other side. Hey folks, it is Theo. I am sitting here with comic book creator Ray Anthony Height, writer, drawer, illustrator, cartoonist, let's call him that. Welcome to the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Theo. I'm glad you reached out and gave me an opportunity to not just be on the show, but to really talk to you, because I watched a few of those interviews. It was some good stuff. So I'm it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. So we're going to talk your Kickstarter campaign, which is Midnight Tiger Evo.
Yes.
That is currently out on Kickstarter. There's about 15 days left in the campaign. We have less than halfway to go, so we are almost there, but I want to help get it over the finish line. So let's talk before we get into the campaign. Let's just talk about Ray Anthony Height. What got you into the interest of not only drawing comics, but eventually writing comics also?
That's a good question. So when I was a kid, the old, I think it was 60s Spider-Man, it was like, the cutout parts, limited animation. I loved that show. I loved it. And so I was a fan. And then I was at my grandmother's house where my cousin lived. And he said, "Oh, you like Spider-Man?" And so he gave me some comics. And it's not that I didn't know comics exist, but I was never in a situation where I was close to any comics. But he had a bunch of them. And he was also an artist. And so, man, he gave me a stack. It had a Power Man and Iron Fist. It had Conan the Barbarian, John Buscema. It had some Spider-Man, had some spotlights, had some Marvel team-ups. So you see the era he had, And my eyes got big, man. I was like, oh my God. And then, when I looked at that Spider-Man, I was like, Spider-Man is a comic book? And he said, that's where the show came from, the comic book. I said, well, I was hooked. And I was already kind of drawing and dabbling. But I knew when I saw those comic books that my world had changed. That was everything for me. And it wasn't until I was drawing, I would draw the characters and stuff like that. I used to draw the Conans all the time. I loved that's when I actually fell in love with John Buscemi's work. I didn't know his name. I just drew what was in the book. But as I grew up, I grew up in Compton. So, we got all kind of stuff happening during that time. At one of the worst times in history, I would say from, 1985 to 1990. And, uh, I was there through the riots, and I had two riots, and I was in high school and all this other kind of stuff. And it was rough. So, my friend at the comic den in Los Angeles, great comic shop, when I came in to meet him, he was like, "You got to meet Joseph Woods. You got to meet Joseph Woods." I met Joseph Woods, and he said something. He said, "Comics saved my life," because he grew up in the same way I grew up, from the hood. And then I said I said, "Joseph, you said something that I say in every interview I've ever done. I said, comics saved our life," and it's true, because when I was a kid, we would go to libraries and read all the books on comic books, and get all that kind of stuff, right? And I was making up stories myself with my group of friends, little nerdy black kids, we all huddled up together and we did that. And I was drawing stories, things that I made up. And I had been doing that ever since I was probably making up stories. I did it ever since I was like 10, 10, 11, since my cousin gave me comics. So, and it just kept expanding. And then by the time I was 19 years old, I produced my own comic book, with my group of friends. And, it was the best thing in the world, because I just didn't want to wait. I didn't know how to get into the Marvel DC back then. As a matter of fact, we didn't see a lot of us doing it, and there wasn't a lot of books back then, So, there was Wizard magazine that come out and stuff like that, but I think before then, the first time I ever saw any black people doing comics was a Black Enterprise magazine with the Milestone Cats on the cover. And when I saw that, that was everything. That was everything, man. And then I started seeing Milestone characters everywhere. So like, what was it, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air at the Beach House. They had the Milestone, and just like you got your prints in the back like that, they had it in the background. And I said, "Wait a minute, that's Danny. That's like it was the covers." And I said, "Oh my God!" And so of course that locked me into that show too, because it's like they comic fans too. They got them also. Little did I know, Rob Edwards, right, who was working up on Defiant with recently. He was a writer on that show. And so it's funny how all these things kind of mix and match together with black people and stuff like that. And so I knew at an early age I wanted to draw comics. I love animation now. I also drew stuff in animation, and I did get a chance to work in animation for a year too. But I always came back to comics, because that's my love. That's my love language, is what to say. So, yeah, that's me. That's me in comics. Kid from Compton doing comics.
Okay, so you have been all over the industry. You've worked, of course, at the big two at Marvel and DC, but you've also dipped your toe in the indies, doing stuff at Zenoscope. But one of the things that I found really interesting when preparing for this was you did some work over at Viz doing manga. So what influence does manga have on your style? Because you're not going to tell me I don't see that when I look at some of these images that you have up on the campaign page. So what type of influence did manga have on your drawing career?
First of all, you are amazing, because when I'm on it, I've never heard anybody go that deep on my background. So the fact that this came up, that was awesome. And it's a great story attached to it. I just never. So I'll tell you, at the same time, what got me started, really what it was the cartoons we grew up with. So Thundercats and Bionic 6 was my jam. It was to this day, it's my favorite cartoon. And then when I found out that a lot of it was produced in Japan, because it was beautiful. Beautiful animation, was real cool. I just loved that show. But Thundercats, Silverhawks, all that kind of stuff. Battle of the Planets was everything. I would rush home from school, you know.
Battle of the Planets and Voltron for
And
me.
Voltron, both of them. Okay, the Cars and the Lions. And so I would watch that. I would watch Transor Z, that old like robot kind of look giant robot thing, stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff. And then before I knew what we was watching, you know what was airing in America, and it was only like in the wee hours of the morning, 5 o'clock, when they turned the stations back on and the cartoons was on. The first Dragon Ball. Yep, the first Dragon Ball. The first, and it didn't last very long. I don't think it aired very long during that time. But it was Dragon Ball and something else, Dragon Quest or something. Anyway, I love that stuff. And it wasn't until a couple of my best friend Chris Mitchell, he introduced me. He would get the bootlegs of like Fist of the North Star. See, you know about that.
I know about that. Oh yeah.
The bootlegs. Japanese, right?
Look, I'm from the projects of New Orleans. You know, bootlegs was a way of life for some of us.
Yes, it was a way of life, and we was trading them back and forth. Hey, you got that? You got, Yes. So then we ended up going to a spot, and a friend of mine, another friend of mine, because Chris introduced me to like that type of bootleg animation. I had another friend who introduced me to the big phone book manga. So the first time I ever seen Shonen Jump. First time. And he bring me this book, and we was kind of geeking out about this character and the style, and like this character doesn't even have a nose, but what they were doing was so influential. I had another moment, and I must have been about 13 about that time. So 3 years after, really 3 or 4 years after really getting into comics, now I got introduced to manga, and it was like boom, And so I was one of the person that ended up keeping the book too long. I was supposed to return it to my friend. I was one of those people. He ended up giving it back, but we just spent hours and hours pouring over that. And so flash forward to when I was about 16, I had a car. We would go to the bootleg places to pick up some of the stuff. Didn't understand a word of it, but we would go into the manga shops. And I was picking up stuff like Bastard and Lone Wolf and Cub, and what was the other one? It was other manga that I'd have to do. I got some of them up here. I had manga that I showed to some people this weekend at Los Angeles Comic Con. I've had a book for over 32 years.
Wow.
The pages are yellow, like almost gold. Almost gold. And because that's a book that they had in print, and it was called Ozen. It was beautiful. It was done by the guy who did the designs for Samurai Showdown.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great. So all of those are my big influences. And so that changed. And then, of course, guess what we saw in 89? We saw Akira.
So true story, and most of the folks who follow me know I came into manga late. Now, of course, I was an anime before I even knew I was an anime, because like you, it was Voltron. It was I'll go even before that. It was Speed Racer before I knew.
Get that? Yes.
Before I knew where it came from. So I was in anime before I knew I was in anime. But I got into manga fairly late. And when I say fairly late, I would say within the last 5-10 years. And that's because I have a lot of friends who have really been following it, and who has really taken the time to say, okay, start here. This is kind of the foundation. Speaking about Akira and how Akira started. And so, I've recently picked up Infinity Force, which is Gotcha Man and that crew. So it's new to me, but when I look at it and when I read it and then I read regular comic books, I can still see how manga, which has been around just as long,
Yes.
has influenced the comic book industry. And I think it's needed simply because publishers know manga is kind of where it's at.
Yeah.
You know, I my boss's son, he knows I'm a huge comic fan. He's a huge comic fan, but he's talking Chainsaw Man.
Oh
He's
yeah.
talking One Punch Man. He's talking One Piece, and all that stuff, you know, it's manga. You're not gonna you may see a Naruto and a crossover with the Ninja Turtles, but in the end, it's still old fashioned manga and
Yes.
old fashioned anime, and you will almost always see the manga influence the comic book and not the other way around because
That's
they know.
right.
Because they know. And I remember last year when I did uh, my best of for a manga was actually Batman Justice Buster, which was their
Oh
manga
yeah.
series that they did. And just seeing how manga influenced the world of Gotham and everything about Batman was just so awe-inspiring. And
Oh,
so, I do some webtoons every once in a while. Like I said, I'm reading all of the volumes of Infinity Force now that it's back in print. So yeah, I'm new, but I try to pick up a little bit from everybody that I talk to who already loved it and has been in it for a while.
well, I would tell you if you need some recommendations, come hit me up
I'm gonna,
because
I'm gonna pick your brain. I got your email. I'm surely gonna ask for a hookup because
yes.
I I know that I'm behind the times when you know the history of it. So I get a lot of time on weekends. I could definitely read. I'm 50. My daughter's grown and she's moved out and she got her own thing to worry about. So I definitely got the time on my hands.
And let me tell you, when you read this stuff, you're not gonna feel 50. You're gonna feel 20. You're gonna feel
And
12.
it's amazing and whether it's anime or whether it's manga, it's amazing how regressive
Mhm.
American comics were and in a way still are
Yes, I agree.
in how they do things. I mean, because I remember the first time I started watching Gotcha Man
Mm.
instead of Battle of the Planets,
Yeah,
which
it's
was
a
the
whole different
American.
thing.
Yeah, and Junpei is just cussing worse than I do, and I'm
Yep.
just like, you're a teenager.
Yeah.
So, you learn a lot about just how different cultures are compared to your own when you're able to explore and read or watch stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, and it's so funny when we talk about you. But I was thinking like you're 100% right, Theo. It's a culture shock to a certain degree because the thing I've been preaching for years now, and they're starting to do it put like image or whatever. They did it in the 80s with things like Faust and Cerebus or whatever. They was telling stories that they didn't talk down to people. They just told the story they wanted to tell. But Japanese like manga's been doing that forever.
Yes.
There are manga that are about businessmen, and you read it on the train just as much as there is Demon Slayer. And they're reading the same mangas. They're reading all the same thing, and they can tell any story. It's just another medium.
Mhm.
You can tell any story you want. But in America, we see a comic book, most of the general population, at least at some point, was thinking, oh, this is for kids. It's only us that grew up reading maybe some underground comics or something like that, or definitely the independent comics, really understood, nope, it ain't just for kids. It's for everybody. It's all kind of stories. But now that's changing.
Yes.
Now it's a big difference because, and I think I owe that. Well, not I personally, but I think it's owed to manga because manga has been, once it gets translated into the anime, then people will say, "Oh man, well this is cool. Oh wait, these cartoons, they're not for kids, but it's such a good story. I'm getting hooked to it, right?" And that's what they focused on. So the thing
Yeah.
about manga is beautiful because it's always about the story, and it's not like you jump in. Back in the day, American comics, a creative team could be on a comic for 50 issues. The same people on the team. You're not going to see that anymore. And so the story will pivot in a way that maybe you can't see it going in the same direction because they have a new creative team, they have a new artist and a new writer. Even but Chris Claremont and Jim Lee, they got many books that
Yeah.
was. And Chris, he saw a bunch of different artists on his run. So all the things that they use right now, a lot of it is Chris Claremont's thoughts. And let's say overall, what is it? They said that he's definitely working with the X-Men over 15 years. You're not seeing that. You're not seeing
Yeah.
that. Not in American comics, unless it's an independent.
Exactly. I was just going to say, unless it's an indie book, such as a Once and Future or Spawn,
Yes, or Spawn, or
before
Invincible.
McFarlane. Yeah, and I was shocked when Batman got to 85 under Tom King.
Yes.
And in New 52, Scott Snyder brought it to 50 issues more or less, and Tom King brought it to almost 100. And you don't see that much anymore.
No, you don't. It's rare. It's rare.
Yeah, you have them on there for a few years, and they all say, "Hey, I want to be on here as long as I can." I have a 3-year, a 5-year plot that I put together, and it never lasts.
No.
And it's not because of the creator; it's because of, like you say, the medium and the business of it. Knowing,
it
hey,
really is the corporations.
yeah, and it's time for a change. So like I said, like you said, it's more of a rarity amongst the big two.
Yeah. It really is. I would love to see. I know you got favorite writers right now that you're thinking, I wish they was on a longer run. And they just, I don't know. Maybe it's their choice. They want to jump one thing or another. I mean, some writers and artists are like that. They don't want to stay in the same thing. But that's the difference between manga. If you have a manga, typically number one, that's very different than the American market. It's one creator.
Yes.
They write it and they draw it. They might have assistants, but it's one vision, right? And something occasionally there's two, but there's never more than that. And it's the entirety of the story. It's the entirety story. So you get one vision, one voice all the way through. And then they translate that to anime.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so that can go to perpetuate that. So think about the work of Akira Toriyama. Right? He's been on Dragon Ball forever. I mean, God rest his soul, recently passed, but it was just like he had built something so great. Tezuka, who is supposed to be the godfather of manga, who was influenced by Disney comics, the creator of Astro Boy and Simba the Lion, and all those other manga that got turned into anime. You're on these projects forever, ever. Go 13, things that started before we were probably born or when we were younger, that are still popular today. They're still popular today. So, but it's only because the creator and the companies that keep perpetuating that. How many books that you have gone through the wayside in American comics that nobody remembers you?
I got you.
So that's the thing. That's the thing. And that's with the indies, we have the power to do that, but our economy is different from Japan. Our interests are different. It's a cultural thing. Because one thing that they do in manga that we do not do is color. And that adds another element to it. But the other thing is they care more about character than the rest of the thing in manga. Like you'll follow a character. And the old American guys, like, you care about Spider-Man. That's why you care about Spider-Man, because Spider-Man can go and go and go. Right? You're invested in the character and you're invested in Peter Parker, not Spider-Man per se. Right? You got She-Hulk on your wall, right? You know about Jen. You know all about Jen, right? One of your favorite characters, right? Now, does it matter who's working on Jen, or are you just following the character?
Follow the character.
That's it. And so that is the secret behind Marvel. They focus on the characters. They don't focus on really plot. And they make people every week get ingratiated, and addicted to seeing what is this character going to do again. We don't get a chance to do that in American comics, but an independent creator can. That's why The Walking Dead, Rick Grimes, he was trying to figure out how Rick Grimes is going to get out of this one. Like it's that kind of thing, and it's going on and on and on and on. And when you can do that, then you have built an audience of people who care about the character, and will follow that character pretty much anyway.
Yeah. I totally get it. So you mentioned earlier your love for Conan, and Conan being one of those first characters that you drew.
Yeah.
Over your career, is Conan still your favorite to draw? Or
No, not my favorite to draw.
okay,
If it was my favorite character to draw is my own, it's Midnight Tiger. It's Gavin Sharp, but a very close number 2, but had been number 1 before I created my character, Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. He represents everything that comic books are about, as far as I'm concerned. That with great power must come great responsibility. But I got a cold, or I'm sick, or I'm broke, but I'm out there saving people, and I'm not asking for money. Because I know what that was like when I tried to ask for money and monetize my ability. It ended up with my uncle getting killed. And so it's called priorities. Like what my uncle said resonates with me. And guess what I do as a character, as a human being, as a 3-dimensional character? I put that out into the world. So you root for Pete. Like Pete is losing dates, and I'm on this date with Mary Jane, but I hear this scream in the distance. What do I do? And so as people reading this comic, what will we do? Like it poses conversations and questions that we have to ask ourselves versus other characters that can do everything. They're kind of boring, and it's more about their powers, and it's more about who are they going to stop destroying this thing the next day? No, it's when we're in the lives of these people, the soap opera aspect of characters. That's what made me love Spider-Man. I loved his supporting cast. I loved all of that stuff. It was just really, really good. Conan is cool to draw, but he didn't resonate with me the way Peter Parker resonated. So Pete's my favorite to draw. He's my favorite to read.
okay.
That's
What was there a character that you just found difficult to draw? Maybe because the costume changed over time, or the vision you have for the character wasn't necessarily what the story needed at that time. Was there a character that just kind of gave you fits every once in a while?
That's a good question. Huh. That's a good question, Theo. The character that was difficult to draw. I would say one character, because what I had in my mind was an older version, was Brother Voodoo / Dr. Voodoo.
Okay.
And I drew him in Marvel Comics Presents Spider-Man, basically rehashing, this thing with Crusher. It was the whole mystic thing. And there's a couple of times I drew him in the old way, and I had to erase him because he had a new look, because he got dreads and stuff like that. And different things to his costume. And I was like, oh, that's right, he don't look like that. So that was more like me messing myself up with my memory. So at one point I basically had the picture over here, so I could jog my memory. And then after a while, it was okay. And there wasn't even anything.
I am so happy he got the attention he did in Strange Academy. Yes. He's one of those characters that is very underrated, has a lot of great history, and then for one reason or another disappears from time to time. And when he became the headmaster of Strange Academy, based in New Orleans,
Yep, that's right.
so stuff like that. People know if New Orleans is in the book, I'm picking it up. So Strange Academy, Strange Academy is just one of those titles that I picked up, just to represent, and it ended up being a good story as well.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's good.
yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Studio Skye-Tiger.
Okay.
What was your dream that made Studio Skye-Tiger come to fruition? This is your imprint, your publishing company.
So I just right before I jumped on this, I just got out of a company meeting, and a lot of the things had happened over the course of the weekend. But let's go back. I so we talked about my influence about manga, right? And when I discovered about uh, assistants and how manga studios work and the mangaka and all that, I was enthralled. I was like, "This is how can you produce a 15 to 24 page comic in a week? How can you do that? That's incredible." Well, I got into the week. This one thing about me, Theo, when I'm like a dog with a bone. I try to absorb every bit of information about anything I'm interested in, almost to a fault. So I was all in. I was figuring out how they do things, the tools they use, the schedule, and all that kind of stuff. Even before it was on the internet, I would figure that. So I would get import books and try to discern what these things meant, even though I couldn't read the language. And after a while, I did pick up some characters like, oh, this must mean this, because I was doing it so much. And I kind of interpreted some stuff. So what I had discovered about that was I loved the way that worked. I had never officially worked in a studio. I did work with a group of guys when I was younger, and I said I produced that book in 19. We were just a bunch of friends, and that was the closest thing I ever had to a studio. So, you graduate, I become an actual professional. I work for Marvel, I'm doing all this stuff. But before I did that, I'm an independent creator also. And so ideas come to me all the time. And you mentioned you were talking about Joe Illegitimately. And so Joe and I would talk about things like he knows a bunch of stuff that I was working on, different ideas and stuff like that. And I come up with stuff all the time. And I said, what I would love is if I could produce more stories. But you got to keep your lights on because I'm also, I'm a commercial artist. I work in comics. I do this to get paid too. So how can I do, let's say, my own book and then still work for another company or whatever? So that was the idea. Because in my heart, I think I'm more in line with a mangaka than I am with a regular American artist. I'm definitely a mixture of both. But when I see people in America like Mike Mignola being Hellboy, right? I think it's awesome because it's one man, one vision, and doing what he loves. That's all I ever wanted to do. So the next thing is I was an anime fan, and I love animation. So I looked at how those studios work, and it was very similar. It was very similar. I said, man, I think I want to do this. I want to produce stuff, and then I want, because me as a person, as Ray Anthony Hyde as a creator, that's one thing, and I'm building my name and I'm doing all that stuff and I'm doing this work, but it's not anything that I own. I don't own any of that stuff. So I said, well, I'm gonna build this studio and we're gonna produce stuff, and then I'll be able to produce work while I can work on this other thing. I did Midnight Tiger in 2012 actually on Kickstarter. And I'm gonna tell you what's funny. The Kickstarter did well, and it was early days, right? It had not even been around that long, 2012. And so I funded, the shipping part was hard, whatever, but it was my own, and I owned it. And then the company called Action Lab wanted to produce the book. So I was with them, and it was a whole rights thing. And I understand like the image thing where the first issue should be able to pay for the rest of the issues, at least get it going, right? Well, based on the numbers that I got from my initial sales after moving Midnight Tiger from my own little small publishing to them, it didn't make enough money to pay for the other ones. And usually Image would cancel a book, right? So I was like, well, just cancel it. We will do, issue 2 came out. I said, we're not making the sales to make any money, and I don't want to owe you guys money, right? Because if I keep printing it and I have to pay that out of pocket for my sales. And if I ain't got no sales, I got to pay y'all. So I don't want to do that. We kept it going, but I decided to stop. Fast forward, I'm working on Superb, right? And Joe Illidge is the editor. David Walker and Dr. Sheena Howard are the writers. And I do the covers and the interiors. This is the first time I've ever launched a book. My first, and I'm moving from Marvel to do this. So I do this book, and we have a great launch. We ended up being the number 2 book on Catalyst Prime, Blindfold. And I'm doing great work. While I'm in the middle of that, guess who offers me a job? And not just any job, but a job that artists wait for. It's Marvel. And they offer me the X-Men. It's X-Men Blue, but it's still the X-Men. And at first, it came in like, well, can you do these few pages for us? Okay, great. I did that while I'm working on another book. One of the things, if you creators out there, especially artists, working on 2 books is insane. It's rarefied air if you can do it. It will break you if you keep that up. It will break you. And it broke me because I only jumped in for the 6 pages at first. And I thought, man, I can't. And I told Joe, I said, I want to do it. He's like, don't be a fool, but do that, X-Men. We'll work it out with the Superb. And I was like, cool. Because Joe's awesome. We're in fancy. But so then they say, you did such a great job. Let's do another issue. And that's when I had to crunch. I was crunching. But that's when I knew. I'm telling you, Theo, that's when I knew.
It drew you in, huh?
It drew me in. And I was convinced, I need to create a situation where I can do multiple things. Like have assistance to ink, like do all this other kind of stuff. So that's really when it started. The seed, it started back then. I didn't start to actually create Studio skye-tiger, the production company, until 2 years ago, maybe 3. And so I was like, yeah, so let's start this. I'm going to have you guys come in. You're going to help me ink, whatever. And I'll teach you every technique that I know. So it was a mentorship. I thought that was great. Even the Kubrick School got into it. Like once I posted it up, they sent out a thing. It was like Ray Anthony Heights looking for assistance, and I got some great assistance in the first iteration, people trying to figure out what they're trying to do. It didn't work out. I mean, we did get some work, and a couple of those books finally came out. But it was like, okay, I see how this works. Because I was doing the layouts, I was doing the pencils, and I was tightening up some inks. But I had a few assistants, and it was just kind of learning again. I was trying to figure out how to make this work. So I'm teaching. I'm also paying them. They're paid interns, essentially paid assistants. And so they were not only getting mentorship, but they're getting paid, just like a minor student. Right.
Okay.
And so that's how the first iteration of it, that's how it started. And I'm gonna go way back. Remember when you brought up Viz?
Mm-hmm.
That was my first production company. That was Right Height Media. And so they hired us to work with Cartoon Network. And we produced their manga shows as graphic novels. So I've been doing this in and out. I've been doing this. The only problem with that, and we shut it down, and we were pretty successful. We shut it down because I wasn't drawing. I was just being a manager. I was managing a business.
You being a businessman.
Yeah, and but I did learn a lot. I learned post-production, pre-production. I learned all that stuff, all the things I didn't know as a regular artist, right? So I'm thankful for that time. I met one of my best buddies, Nate Lovett, who is an incredible designer, incredible artist. He worked with me and ended up being my lead at one point for that. But we shut that puppy down because I was like, I want to draw, I want to create, and I don't want to think anymore. I want to manage people. So that's how I ended up doing that.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that thought concept. I work real job,
Mhm.
in the healthcare industry, and we've done several merger and acquisitions of private practices, and one of the main reasons we're able to do so is because those owners come back and they say, I just want to practice. I don't like the business side is just too damn hard and it's too damn complicated and there's too many damn regulations. Can I just treat a patient? There you go. Here, you have all this, pay me, and I'll treat these patients because they're gonna continue to come and see me. So you'll still have money coming in.
That's right.
I just want to treat. And for someone like you who wants to draw, sometimes I just want to draw.
That's
And,
it.
and it's a journey. You're not always going to be successful on that first go run. Sometimes you gotta falter and learn, and you say, okay, let's try this again.
Yep.
And that
I
seems to
couldn't
be
say
where we
that.
at now.
Well, I mean, that's the problem. What is it? No good deed goes unpunished, Theo. So what it is that I was good at the job. That the problem was I went, but it was like I'm doing these little layouts, and then I got to the point where, like I said, I'm managing. I learned some lettering. I learned all kind of little things back then. But I just wanted to do my book, but it didn't fall out of my head. Now all that information didn't fall out. I retained everything that I did. So I go back to being just a regular, artist on different things. And then I dabbled in animation. I was on Guardians of the Galaxy for a while. I was doing, designs. I was designing GI Joe toys for Hasbro, and doing all kind of stuff during that time. I was really expanding my knowledge. And then I ended up going back to Marvel, and then I just was cool. But all the time, remember, 3 issues of Midnight Tiger was out from the company, Action Lab. So there was issue 0, issue 1, which is the one that I produced with the Kickstarter, and there's issue 2 where I discovered, I ain't getting paid. People was coming up to me after, I get an X-Men book to sign. I might get Superb, right? And I love the work we did on Superb. Superb was some of my best stuff to me, but I'm signing a bunch of X-Men books, and you know what happens? Somebody slides a Midnight Tiger book to him. And he said, "Oh, what was you gonna say?"
Relit that spark.
Yeah, it not only relit it, was kind of like, "Are you gonna get back to this?" This is at the same time they give me an X-Men book to sign. We really like this. This was cool. That would happen. That would continue for at least 5 years. People would come back, and then the buzz started coming, and then people would hit me up online, social media. When you going to do Midnight Tiger? I would draw some stuff from time to time. I even had Action Lab license. I licensed it, just so people would have Midnight Tiger. That wasn't that well received because I wasn't drawing it.
Mm-hmm.
I only co-plotted. I didn't even draw it. I didn't even write it. But people were like, no, we didn't, And I love the creators who was on it, and it was definitely more of an all ages kind of thing version of Midnight Tiger. Again, didn't see a dime from that, and they didn't even print it. I think the first issue got printed, and it ended up either being digital or something. So that people didn't care for that. So that made the hunger for Midnight Tiger to come back even more to the public. It was really hitting it then. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I always feel this is the only thing I want to do. All I want to do is Midnight Tiger. I want to be, Akira Toriyama of American comics. You know what I mean? Like I want to do a thing so long, develop a story so far that there are people cosplaying, and there's toys and there's a bunch of stuff like that. That's what I want out of my creations. So I said, I'm going to go back. And I waited, and then I know we was in some legalities, so I ended up trying to do another Kickstarter, and it was only digital the because actually I had the printing rights, so I couldn't print anything that got printed. It owned, so I didn't want to do that because I would not see a dime. Of whatever I saw would be Kickstarter, and since it was small, Kickstarter, I wasn't really. Kickstarter was good, but it wasn't these gangbuster Kickstarters where I was making a lot of money. It was just enough to fund, which is unfortunate because as for as many Midnight Tiger fans are out there, I thought it would be better. But anyway, so I did it digital, and that was the other problem. The problem was it was digital. People wanted the actual book, this. So, but it funded, and it was funded like $3,500 or something like that, and we did that. But at the same time, I got my rights back during that time. And I would say, the CEO and president of Action, Brian Seaton, he was very kind and generous enough to give me that back, and I appreciate that. I've always appreciated him, and I appreciate him for putting it out there in a certain way. So I get it back, and then another publishing company, CX Publishing, comes, and they say, we want to do a collected edition where the Kickstarter you're just about to finish with the 30-page book or whatever, number 3 to finish out the series. We want that. We want all of them together, and we're going to put it in a nice hardcover. And so I moved over to CX. Let's say the publishing deal was one, because I learned my lesson from the other one. It was very open. It was very cool. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but let me say I'll never have another contract like that unless I make it myself.
It's that journey part.
It's that journey part in a real way. So we did that, book funded. I think we hit almost $12,000 on that one. That was a good one, and we put it out there. It was distributed and everything, and then there were some changes that was being made to the publishing company because the publisher ended up moving, just like we just had a conversation about me wanting to go back to just drawing and not managing. Well, my good friend Andy Schmidt was like, I want to be an editor again. So he became the editor in chief of Boom Suit. And so he let that publishing company go. All rights was reserved to me. And he said, well, do you want to buy the stock left of your book? I was like, yes. It was it was a deal that I couldn't refuse. And I bought all the stock. So now, not only do I have stock of a hardcover, beautifully done book and a collection of the series of the origin of the Midnight Tiger, but I own everything. And I had started Studio skye-tiger. So at the same time, guess what we're doing? Working for DC. The first thing we did was Aquaman tie-in, Aquaman 2. We did a tie-in for that. But we didn't get the Studio skye-tiger name, although my studio did work on it. And so that comes out. And that was supposed to be my last. So I told both Marvel and DC, hey, this is after me getting all this stuff. I think I'm going to be working on my own stuff for a while. And you can come to me if you have anything that's 10 pages or less that you want me to do or cover. But I can't commit to anything more than that. So that was the deals that we made. And then DC editor Marquise Draper, genius, came to me and he says, Ray, remember when you told me that, the right kind of project with the right characters and under 10 pages and under? I got something for you. I ended up doing the Jace Fox and Signal story with Rita Ayala that blew up. And shout out to Marquise for seeing the vision. But then they put our names, Studio skye-tiger, on that book.
And that was a great story. The way the two different dynamics of characters,
Yes.
Jace being the loner and Duke. And I will admit, Duke was not my favorite character when he was first introduced.
I heard that.
Brandon Thomas made Duke Thomas a fun character for me. He made me a fan of Duke Thomas. And by the time that story ended with those two hanging out on the ledge, of that building, there's always those stories you like, I hope they come back to it. I hope they come back to it. I hope they come back to it.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I've been wanting a Brandon Thomas outsider story that focused on Duke ever since he did the Future State stuff and all of those subsequent titles, but yeah, that was a wonderful story with great art and colors. And again, it just shows how the dynamics of two polar opposites
Yes.
can come together to get the job done. And we see it again when Duke kind of recruits Jace to help out with the power company.
Yes,
It came out earlier
that's when we
this year.
came back.
Yep.
Yep.
So yeah, I love that type of stuff. Yeah. So I'm happy Marquise reached out to you and got you to agree to do those 10 pages for that story. Because again, it was beautifully drawn, beautifully colored, and it always works out when someone like my friend. Now let me tell you, I became a friend of them reading the story they did with Black AF.
Oh yes.
And I want to say it was I can't remember, Blackout or something like that, but it Vita is just one of those characters, or one of those creators that when you put a story in front of them,
Mhm.
you never know what you're gonna get out of it.
That's
My
true.
first my first experience was their Live Wire
Oh, that was
story
good.
over at Valiant. And so again, you see names, and when you see names, you just gonna pick it up.
That
No,
was it
no,
for me.
yeah, you just gonna pick it up no matter what. But yeah, so if Marquise, if you're watching this and you want to do a follow-up, make it worth Ray Anthony's time to do another 10 pages, please. Thank you.
Look, he's just going to add you to the pile. Other people have been bugging him about that too, and so shout out to Marquise for the simple fact that he goes. The last words we had was, "Until I find something that's worth your time." And I was thinking,
Make it worth your while.
yeah.
So let's talk about the main topic of this episode. Let's talk about Midnight Tiger. So Midnight Tiger is a new character in the new series for me. So explain to me and everyone else out there who may not be familiar with the character, who Midnight Tiger is.
I'll be happy to. So Midnight Tiger's story of Gavin Shaw, a teenage guy who is living in the city of Apollo Bay, who is in love with the idea of superheroes. He lives in a world where superheroes are fairly regular, and he's been a fan ever since he was probably about 19 years old. And he is always out there looking to see him pass overhead, or something like that. But he started to notice something after a few weeks after being such a big fan. I never see him even pass by, even the ones that fly. I never see him over our city, the city of Apollo Bay. I never see that. I wonder what that's about. And he becomes quite disillusioned because Apollo Bay is rife with crime, right? Apollo Bay is based off of the Compton, California I grew up in the 90s and the late 80s. And it was stuff that was happening that was, it was deaths and shootings and gangbanging and all that kind of stuff all over the place, drugs and whatever. And it seemed like nobody was there to help us. And what I did notice, just like Gavin, is that people just weren't willing to come and help the people who needed help. So, you know how these comics go. In Fateful Time, Gavin's going home from school, not from school, from his friend's house after playing his video games, video game sessions. And he was kind of pissed off. And he was telling his friends that, there's a big superhero team called the Conglomerate that's in Midnight Tiger's Field. He said, the Conglomerate, they're here, saving the world. But I never see him say to people in the city, there's people who need help all the time. I just don't understand that. There's people who need help. So he leaves the house, he's on his bike, and he sees a car in the middle of the street and it's standing up like this. And he's like, oh no, what the heck's going on? There's a character that's called Lion's Blood who's in a group called the Icons. He sees him hurt in an alley, bleeding. First of all, he's stunned to finally see a superhero in the city. But the guy's hurt. And then Lion's Blood's telling him, no, you got to get out of here, kid. Like, you got to go because the person who did this to me is coming back. But of course, it's too late. The hyena ends up ripping Gavin's guts out while he's trying to protect Lion's Blood. Wakes up 3 days later. Kid has powers. And Lion's Blood is dead. Does he take over the legacy and join the Icons? Or does he use his new powers to help his city that has been in need of help since he's been a child? So that's the setup. It is essentially Spider-Man mixed with They Live fighting Darkstalkers.
That is, man, you just mentioned some old school stuff talking about They Live. That's just one of those cult classics.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I will tell somebody I am all out of bubble gum.
Yep.
So,
I'm fresh out of bubble gum.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit about the campaign. So the campaign, again, is on Kickstarter right now. We have about 15 days left, and we got a little bit under 50% left to go. This is not a relaunch, or is it? Is Evo a continuation of the first 3 issues and the issue 0 that you got started at Action Lab?
Yes. So the 3rd issue didn't come out through Action Lab. It came out through the Kickstarter, and it can only be seen if you buy the hardcover. And it is both. It is a soft reboot and a continuation. With some, he's got some updates to his look. And I've been developing the story for a while. And I knew that this is where it was going to go. But because of the legality and stuff, I never got a chance to get there. Now I do. And this will be the only number 1. There will not be a relaunch. There will not be another reboot. It is 1 to 1,000 if I can make it there. And so with this soft relaunch or reboot, we leave off on the end of Midnight Tiger Origins. And this is going to be a spoiler, but it's going to set up what you're going to get in Evo. The guy who was basically, quote unquote, running things, and seemed like he unified all the gangs to basically turn into one big gang under his rule, named Percival Stone, King Stone for short. Gavin defeats him at the end. And there was a casualty. I won't ruin that, but you see it in the Kickstarter. You can read it and see. And at the end, when Gavin defeats him, he says, "You don't understand, man. Like, but basically, what I'm doing is I tried that superhero stuff in the beginning when I first got my powers. That don't put food on the table, and that don't help my mama out and all this other kind of stuff. But you still don't understand because you stopping me from doing what I'm doing and being in here in these streets. I was keeping the body count down. So he is being hired to, let's say, do something that, okay, so basically this is Castros. I'm going to tell you what it is. The Castros are the monsters that are hiding in plain sight as human beings. He was working for the Castros. And their whole goal is to feed on humans, to be entertained by humans, and just like Pete Stone was, to enslave humans. So here he is. We got black people. We got brown people. We got a whole mix of people that is being used as food, as entertainment, and as slaves. And they don't know it. So that's what he told Gavin. He said, "You have no idea what you have unleashed," and that's how that starts.
But he's about to find out.
He is about to find out.
So what can fans who participate in the Kickstarter and back the Kickstarter, and I'm proud to say day one backer.
Hey, that's right, Theo.
So and I back again, not knowing the character. I made sure I got a copy of Origins as well because I want to know what I'm getting into and how we get from A to B before getting anywhere else. But what else as far as awards and the different tiers can fans expect in the campaign for Midnight Tiger Evo?
So we got 7 covers. Now I'm usually not a variant cover guy. I've done several I've collaborated on several Kickstarter campaigns, big ones. The Epiphany Engine. I was doing the cover art for that. They got a what is it? The Evil Knievel Kickstarter going on now. I did a cover for that. I'm usually doing cover art, or if it's an anthology, I have a short story inside. So what I thought was, one of the things is variant covers, and I have several variant covers. One of them is from Thomas Perkins, who is a good friend of mine, but also an Emmy award-winning character designer of Ben 10 and a bunch of other animated shows. And that's a great one. It's good. It's very rare. That cover is very rare. So I think definitely get that one. I have another cover, which I think is one of my favorites of the group, is by Nate Lovett, who is actually depicting Gavin and his friends to show what life is really like in Apollo Bay. Because Apollo Bay is actually, he's going to find out that there's a spell over Apollo Bay. Oh, wait, what's that? You see it?
It's not Apollo Bay.
Yeah, it's not Apollo Bay. It's really Long Beach, but the spell that's over it has changed everybody's mind and is completely rewritten because they're that powerful.
So what I want to know is when will the Ray Anthony Height variant be revealed?
Very soon. Very soon. And I'm actually making that one a Comic Den exclusive. So you can either get it on the Kickstarter or you can either get it at the Comic Den. You will not be able to get my cover anywhere else.
I'm excited. So again, it is Midnight Tiger Evo #1. The campaign is on Kickstarter. It is live right now. We have 15 days to go. If you have not backed it, I strongly suggest that you do so. Again, day one backer here. Before we head out, you mentioned something to me, and I, when you was talking about the Comic Den and things of that nature. I want to talk to you a little bit about Defiant.
Talk to me about it. All right.
And the work you did on that. How did that come together? Because I bought that book when I found out about it after the fact. And for me, my background is in history. My degrees are in history. So when I see stuff like that, it just draws to me, especially for these little known stories that not too many people, if anyone, know about. Yes. How did you get involved with that project?
It was very it's one of those situations where it's out of the blue, completely unexpected. I got a direct message on Instagram from a guy called Rob Edwards. And I didn't know Rob, but he says, "Hey, I have this project." And Dennis Cowan, who is my mentor, recommended you to me. And once I knew that he knew Dennis, and I know Dennis would not send anybody without, that wasn't reputable to me. I said, "Okay, well, I'll listen." He says, "We set up a meeting." And so the next DM I got after I said yes, he said, "Yeah, I don't know if you know me, but I wrote Princess and the Frog and Treasure Planet." And I was like, "Oh, well, my daughter is a big fan of Princess and the Frog." And Dennis was the person who recommended it. I said, well, depending on the project, depending on what it is, I might just say yes to it. So we finally had that meeting. It was a nice meeting. Love meeting Rob, great guy. And he goes, have you ever heard of the story of Robert Smalls? And I was thinking, I said, that really sounds familiar. It really sounds familiar. And I thought immediately to my first grade teacher, Miss Cook. And Miss Cook told us about Robert Smalls. Didn't spend too much time, but it wasn't even on the curriculum. But she was just, I mean, again, I'm from Compton, Caldwell Street School. And she's teaching a bunch of little, black and brown kids. And she's telling us about this war hero. She might have been, in the same, not the same era, but like growing up with this story. And she said, yeah, this is a black man who, took over a boat during the Civil War. And he was a slave. And he helped free the slaves, got them to this whole checkpoint. And so I hadn't heard it. Now, I just turned 51. The whole book was done a couple of years ago, right? So I hadn't heard that story in decades. In decades. When Rob said, we want to tell the story. And I told him that. And he said, yeah, I haven't heard it. They don't teach this. This is forgotten history. Important. And once he gave me the information, Theo, I was like, this is a superhero. This guy has all the markings of a superhero. I want to do this book. So me and Rob, in the beginning, we had our plans to kind of do an animation style with it. So me and my company, Studio Skye-Tiger, we were just a production company, not a publishing company. And I said, well, we can do this. And so we did a lot of the design work. We did a bunch of stuff, a lot of pre-production stuff. And that was cool. They ended up deciding to go into a more traditional comic style, which you got. So, but that was Studio Skye-Tiger's in to it. So we did a lot of the pre-production work and stuff like that. And then they came back to me once they had, got the covers and figured out they wanted a different direction. They said, I think Sebastian Jones came out to me and said, hey, we want you, since you were on the project in the beginning, to do your cover. And I said, okay, well, what's your idea? So he said, I ran this by Rob. And he said, I think Shaft homage would be cool. And knowing the character, Robert Smalls, and everything that he's done, I was like, it's perfect. And so I went to town and knocked that cover out. And I think that cover sold out. The hardcover, just about. I think it's sold out a couple times. So I was just glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, it is. Again, it was a great story, a wonderful story. And I often wonder how much more appreciation people will have of history if they were able to read it in formats like a graphic novel.
I thought the same.
You wonder just how much more appreciation and interest in history that people may have. Again, I'm like you, grew up in an urban school, Rob Wynn, Career Magnet High School, right here, class of 93. And, my history was my worst subject in high school. Hated it. Totally hated it. I had 3 American history teachers in 1 year. One of them, basically contradicted the entire book. To his credit, though, he was telling the truth.
Oh,
that goes to show where education was at that time. But my favorite history class was world history. And when I finally got to college, I was a poli-sci major. And I ended up, history was a part of the curriculum. And before I knew it, the guy who would eventually become my research professor, he stopped me and he was like, Mr. Wright, why aren't you a history major? Well, I'm in poli-sci. He's like, no, you're not. You're in history. And I'm like, no, I'm in poli-sci. He said, Mr. Wright, When's the last time you took a look at your transcript? Because you have twice as many history credits than you do at poli-sci. You're a
Wow.
history major, and history became my thing. And so, come to find out, the guy that would be my major professor, my research professor, was also my world histories research professor when he was at school. So, when you're taught and when you're presented the facts in a way that makes it a little bit easier, but also make it a little bit more interesting to pick up, you know, this I remember reading a book about one of the worst lynchings in American history, and it happened in New Orleans, and nobody knew about it until you look it up, and you're like, why don't more people know about this? And I think doing something like graphic novels could really open up the world to historians. We see it a lot. George Takei did his more or less biography talking about the Japanese internment camps.
Yes.
There was the story about the march across the Pettus Bridge, and when you see stuff like that, and it's true, these are true stories.
Right.
I'll be willing to bet you can get a lot more appreciation for history than years and dates, years, names and dates, years, names and dates, and hopefully it picks up more. But I thoroughly enjoyed Defiant and the work that you guys did on that project. So thank you for that. But again, it is Midnight Tiger Evo. The campaign is on Kickstarter. Ray Anthony Heights, you are not going to escape this. Before I let you go,
Oh boy.
it is time for rapid fire. I gave you fair warning. 2 choices. There are no right or wrong answers. But if I get you in the cross, it's not my fault. Let me know when you're
I'm
ready.
scared now. Okay. What you got?
All right. Let's kick things off. I got a list. All right. Speed Racer, Racer X.
Racer X.
Okay.
Easy.
Batman, a Moon Knight.
That's a hard one. Man, I love Moon Knight. Moon Knight.
Okay. G.I. Joe or Cobra?
Cobra.
Okay. Jumping into video games. Chun-Li or Katana?
Yeah. Hold on. Wow. Okay. Chun-Li.
Okay. Voltron or Robotech?
Robotech.
All right.
Robotech, sure.
All right. Let's dive a little bit deeper.
Okay.
Voltron cars or Lions?
Lions. Easy.
Okay. I just got to be sure. I don't want to talk about the conversation we had before we started this.
I know. No. Are you waiting for that one?
Yeah, I was waiting for that one. Last one, and you already know what it is.
Yeah.
Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited.
That question is so hard that this entire interview, I've been thinking how I was going to answer.
Well, you're the tiebreaker right now. Right now, it's tied.
No, for real? Okay.
It is.
Oh, man. That's tough. Because I recently, my wife and I did a recent rewatch of the animated series.
Okay.
But it's going to be hard. I'm going to have to go with Justice League Unlimited. I'm going to have to go with it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, y'all. But that's my pick.
That's your pick. That's all right. So it's now 5-4 with JLU leading the way. So just so you know, the animated series had a tough going. I mean, a couple of folks really jumped on, you know, Justice League Unlimited first, and I want to say it may have been Joe who struggled before finally saying the animated series simply because of the impact it had on
Yeah.
the industry with the subsequent stories that came after it. But yeah, so it's now been going back and forth, and so now Justice League Unlimited leads the way by 1-5 to 4. Ray Anthony Hyde, how can fans keep up with you and everything that you're working on today?
You can find me mostly on Instagram these days because we're rebuilding the Studio skye-tiger comics website. So that won't be available for probably a couple months. So you can find me at R.A. Height Comics on Instagram, and you can find the studio at Studio skye-tiger Comics. Sky is spelled with an E, and that's also on Instagram. Facebook, you can find me at Ray Anthony Height there, and Blue Sky, R.A. Height there. But I want to say this, Theo. I'm tell you the tipping point for me for that one. It's Green Lantern from the anime from Unlimited, because as much as Batman the Animated Series did for other characters, so many of us, well, me, I've known about John Stewart forever, but that put John Stewart in the minds of the general public, and I can't beat that. Can't beat that. That was the tiebreaker for me in my mind.
It's safe to say he's your Green Lantern.
He's my Green Lantern.
Okay, all
He's
right.
my Green Lantern. I never liked Hal.
You never like Hal.
I never liked Hal. I liked Kyle Rayner for a long time, but he still wasn't gonna be John Stewart though.
So let me tell you, and please don't kill me for saying this. So Guy is my Green Lantern.
You with me?
Followed by what used to be John. Joe has taken over the second spot from Far Sector. So it's now Guy, Joe, and John, and those are my three lanterns. If I can get those three in a book together, DC could take all of my money, and I wouldn't care, because again, the three of them are again kind of how I was speaking about earlier about those polar opposites that when you put them together can just make a story click. And those, I mean, personality wise, those three are just so out there. I would love to see all three of them in a series together. I think that would just rock and roll. All
Theo, yours is fairly close to mine. Mine is John, Guy, and Kyle.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't read much Joe, but yeah.
I don't know why I struggle with Kyle. And people look at me when I say that about Kyle, because a lot of folks, Kyle is their Green Lantern. And I feel the same way about Tim Drake, and I get ugly looks when I say that. But again, really? I grew up, Dick Grayson was Robin.
Yeah.
And I voted for Jason to die. He had to die. I voted for him.
I love how you came out with
that. And I don't have an issue with Tim, but Tim wasn't Dick. He wasn't Dick Grayson. No. And so Dick Grayson will always be my Robin, even though Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin right now. Really? But if I had to list it, Dick Grayson will always be number one.
So top three, go ahead. Robin. I gotta know. We already know Dick is one of them. This is number one.
So in order, Dick, Damian, Kelly.
Okay, I hate that, but
So,
and
so,
I
so,
hate it.
so let me just say,
Hmm,
I was in that same boat with you. If DC had done a similar campaign like Death in the Family,
yeah,
that little bastard would have
yeah,
died
right,
too, even though he
right,
did die. But I would have voted for him to die.
yeah.
So it was
You would
only
have been on the
after,
track.
yeah, it was only after he came back that he became my Robin, my favorite Robin. So yeah, I hated Damien when Grant
See,
Morrison
people
first
said that
created him.
when he came back, whatever change that was, it was like I hated that little bastard at first, but now because of
And
and so yeah,
he's still a little prick. Don't want to take the other way. He's a prick through and through. But there's just death did something to him, and I'm okay
yeah.
with that.
Look, I'm okay with that too. And what's sad is I like what he represents. I think he is written so well, and for me to say that, that means that he's written well.
Yeah, I I
Yeah,
I,
he's written well.
I think when you look at his history in the hands of Peter Tomasi
Yes, yes.
and this past recent history with Joshua Williamson,
Mm,
they just brought out a bit of personality that the character really needed.
yeah,
And so yeah, so that
I agree. I agree. I just be holding on to my hate. I
well
mean,
there
for me, my favorite. If we're talking partners, or we're talking folks who actually have the mantle of Robin. Tim is my number one. Grayson is my number two, and Kelly is probably my number three. It depends on the day, right? It depends on the day.
mhm.
Number three. Jason is nowhere in sight. I would pick Damien before I pick Jason.
Would you pick Stephanie before Jason?
I would pick Stephanie before I pick Jason. And so you saying so Stephanie, if there was no Kelly, it would be Stephanie.
If I will always say, and I've said it many times in public to all of my Red Hood fans out there, you're welcome. Because because if it wasn't for folks like me who voted multiple times, I voted maybe 10 times. So when that phone bill came and it had a $7.50 charge on there for dialing that number,
Your parents is pissed off.
no, it was my grandmother.
Ooh.
So you know old school grandmothers.
Yes. As soon as you said it.
If it wasn't if it was allowed and she could have took pictures of the ass whooping she gave me when she got that phone bill. And I never saw my grandmother move that fast in life to get after me. My grandmother was the big lady, but she got her hands on me. And that's how I paid back that $7.50. Because I had Jason Todd had to die. So it was worth it. And again, Red Hood fans, you're welcome.
Yep.
So
Don't worry, you pay me back.
Ray Anthony Height, man, I truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Comic Ben Comic Book Podcast.
My pleasure, man. This is fun.
So again, I want to thank Ray Anthony Height for joining me on this podcast. I truly enjoyed the conversation. So just so you know, we probably talked a good 20, 30 minutes before I even hit the record button, and just talking a lot about everything within the comic book industry. You know, he and I are around the same age, and we got into comics in different ways, but coming from our backgrounds, comics served as an avenue of peace and tranquility for us. It probably, as he said, saved his life and probably saved mine as well. But again, I want to thank him for sitting with me and talking about his career and talking about Midnight Tiger Evo. Again, the campaign is on Kickstarter. I have links in the show notes. Again, go out there, give him your support. Let's bring this project to life. Last time I checked, it was a little bit over halfway to making this campaign funding goal. So if we can all chip in and make that happen, and let's bring that comic back to life. It was something that has been out on the comic book shelves before. He wants to continue that story now, grow that universe. Let's do our part to make that happen. So again, just check out the show notes, and let's give Ray Anthony our support for this campaign. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Next time, well, Theo is in the process of heading out. He is heading to New York and the Javits Center for New York Comic Con 2025. I will be there. I will definitely have some lanyards. So if you're out there, you see me, make sure you stop me and ask for one. I'll be sure to have them for you. I may even have a few t-shirts to give away, as well as I will be walking the floors of the Javits Center, meeting creators and meeting fans, and just covering the event as I've been doing for the last couple of years. And of course, as I cover New York Comic Con, I'll be doing those recaps on a nightly basis, just to give my insight as far as what happened on that day. And of course, make sure you are following us on social media as I attend certain panels, particularly the Marvel and DC one. I will do my best to post updates from those particular panels, just in case anything new is announced. These days, a lot of things are put out there before events such as New York Comic Con and San Diego Comic Con, but who knows, they may surprise us. So again, make sure you're following us on the socials as well. So I'll be posting updates if there is anything that's quickly and unexpectedly put out in one of these panels that I'll be attending. But again, that's going to do it until we meet again for New York Comic Con. Again, I want to thank you all for support. I know I've been out for a bit, but things are starting to slow back down, and I'll be able to get back into doing my weekly episodes here on YouTube, as well as on your favorite podcast platform. But until next time, I will see you all later. And again, if you are going to be in New York for New York Comic Con, again, make sure you stop me, get a lanyard, get a t-shirt if I have any left, and say hi, and shake my hand and I'll shake yours. But as always, I will see you all next time for another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'll see you on the other side. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.